if you're going to have new species, you really have to have isolated populations. And Lomatium have a lot of characters that help them do that. For one thing, because isolated populations become new species, sooner or later. For one thing, they're upland plants, so they're not going to be moved around on the feet of ducks like so many wetland plants. They're insect pollinated, which admittedly isn't as good for generating new taxa as self-pollination, but it's a lot better than wind pollination. Keep those genes relatively local. The fruit have been demonstrated to disperse rather poorly. Okay, and they're highly variable. Flowers are usually yellow. The leaves can be very fern-like, but they can be broader, and the flowers can be brown or purple, and the foliage can be entirely glabrous and glaucous, or it can be just densely hairy, or anything in between. And then, of course, the fruits have characteristics that could be used for identification. If you collected the mature fruits, people, get rid of it. 2/3 of Lomatium specimens are in flower, and most of the rest have immature fruits. There's one species we worked on. There's one collection with mature fruit. This isn't good, okay? Now, when you're looking for new species, you think about going out into the wilderness areas, right? Climbing up on Castle Carex to places people very rarely go. Well, there's a problem about that for finding new species, which is, okay, maybe you find them, but how do you know what you've got? You really got to take your plant into the herbarium, compare it, key it out, compare it to other things, or you can do most of the work entirely in the herbarium. That's where Kevin and I found most of our new species initially. There are a number of people working on Lomatium right now. Let's see, Mark Derrick, Kevin, Rick McNeil, and you may wonder where he is, but there he is. Jim Smith and Don Mansfield from Idaho, and Jason Alexander. And they all gave me help. Because I didn't know anything about Lomatium when I started. I still think maybe I don't. Okay. That's how many undescribed species or subspecies of limited ranges we think we've found. There's a little bit of work to be done. Also, the widely distributed Lomatium dissectum and Lomatium macrocarpum have more variation than you would expect. I don't know if they are best treated as polymorphic species or split up, but research needs to be done range-wide. A bit of information about the difference between speciation and taxonomy. I'm going to show you some graphs like this. And I'm going to do that even though speciation is usually like this. The textbooks all have the species split and both of the branches change. Well, usually one species just goes along being itself, and it throws off little twigs once in a while that change. But we'll ignore that. When everything looks alike, we'd agree it should be considered one species. When it becomes different, maybe you want to call them subspecies or varieties, or more distant subspecies or varieties, or maybe really distinct subspecies or varieties, or maybe you could call these two species. And one thing about taxonomy you learn after a while is that this is a process. The reality is out there. We humans need names, but the plants don't give a damn. So there's a certain trivialness about naming them, which doesn't stop us from fighting about it. You understand? We have arguments. Okay, let's see an example of this. Lomatium ravenii. There's two varieties in California. The one on the top is the very rare form, which lives near Ravendale, southern Lassen County. And on the bottom, the one that lives from Lassen County to Idaho. Now I have to ask you, are these the same kind of plant? No, I don't really think so. No. They differ in how hairy they are. The one on this side, whether it's left, this side, the one closer to me, whatever you want to call it, left or right, is written up as being glabrous, and it's not completely glabrous, so that makes people think there's intermediate plants, but it's just not completely glabrous. The other one is, there's a difference in leaf shape. They can be quite pronounced. No, they're not the same. I figured there's two species here. So I contacted my mentors and I said, hey, we gotta hurry up and describe this one before FNA comes out. And they said, no, hold it, wait. And they sent me a DNA phylogeny that indicated quite clearly that Lomatium ravenii var paiutense and var ravenii are sister taxa. So they said, so we don't really need to call them different species. I said, but they're so different. They said, no, we don't need to. I thought, I'm not going to die on that hill. So I just call them the same species, two different varieties. You know, you can do what you want to about it, hint, but that's what I did. Two sister taxa. Lomatium tracei, as Kevin has just told you, is full of problems. Disjunct populations, that should just make you say, ding, 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 something's wrong here. Well, in this case, you figured it out. Some of them were Lomatium cogolini, an undescribed taxon, and some are misidentified caruifolium. But what about these ones in the southern Cascades? They look like Lomatium tracei, except they have yellow flowers, and their DNA says they are related to Lomatium marginatum, and it's confusing. So maybe you should solve that problem. I'm going to be so glad to wash my hands of these things. Lomatium anglomania, disjunct population. Once again, Lomatium cogolini and misidentified plants. But even once we're done with that, we have the problem that there are disjunct plants in Oregon. Maybe that really is anglomania. Maybe it's really not disjunct and there's plants in Northern California that could be found. Maybe it's a new species. Somebody ought to find out. Not going to be me. There's a couple of other unknown Lomatiums in Northern California. We don't know at this point if these are the same species or not because different people have seen them. And Kevin, there is a specimen of Julie's plant here at Chico. So anyway, those are there. At least one of them is definitely a new species. Maybe both of them. Maybe they're the same thing. Nick Jensen has further south in California, Nick Jensen has an undescribed species related to Lomatium macrocarpa. Here. There's a new holly-leaved Lomatium, not this one, but sort of like it, down in San Diego. No name. Lomatium caruifolium is a mess. The easy part is the one in Catalina Island looks to be different. There it is in the midst of grass. Kevin's going to be looking for it this spring. But Lomatium caruifolium is widely distributed and has a lot of variation. 5 names. Okay? That's what it tends to look like with those broad bractlets Kevin was telling you about. Not to be confused with Lomatium utriculatum with the broad bracts, which is more widely distributed. Except, of course, I think we did confuse it for a while. But back to caruifolium. The plants on the Sierra Nevada have narrower bractlets. They tend to be a little bit toothed. It's called variety denticulatum. And also in the Sierra Nevada, you have marginatum with its very, very thin bracts. Caruifolium and marginatum overlap. They overlap a lot. There's a variety of marginatum that grows on the east side of the west side of the Great Valley that has kind of wider bractlets. They tend to be toothed, look kind of like the denticulated bractlets. At least you can tell, it's called variety purpureum, and at least you can tell it because the flowers are purple, right? Except when they're not. There are plants I can't distinguish which of these species it is, marginatum or caruifolium. So I think there's room for work. Oh, and then if you do work on this, you will find out that David Douglas collected the type specimen of caruifolium in, quote, California, end quote. Yes, that's so fun. So basically you have an upper left, caruifolium with big bracts, bottom right, marginatum with very thin bracts, and then you have the other two varieties which actually look much too much alike. Okay, overlap. Oh, so in Lomatium, we know that there are clues in the fruits, even if you never collect them. And in this case, you can see that's going to be a great help. Not. Lomatium dissectum, called the fern-leafed Lomatium. Leaves can be finely divided, sometimes like in this Florida version of, Washington version of very finely divided. They have dark purple or brown flowers, tend to be called chocolate chips. Okay. All those leaves belong to specimens that could be keyed to Lomatium dissectum. Yeah. No, they're not all Lomatium dissectum, but what are they? Plants east of the Cascades tend to have more broadly divided leaves and yellow flowers, except when they're brown and purple. Not nearly so ferny. So we divide dissectum into the west side version dissectum and the east side version multifidum. Only there's a whole lot of variation within multifidum. So I think there's a lot of undescribed variation there that at least ought to be quantified, and maybe we have new taxes. That's their distribution in Oregon according to the Jepson. Lomatium macrocarpa, I like this one because I have collected it and I can actually identify it. Isn't that wonderful? It has tubers, which are often used to key them, you know, but the tubers are deep and so people don't collect it. Maybe it's going to be split into many taxa. It's very widely distributed as far east as northern Great Plains. Tends to have very large bractlets, except when it doesn't. It usually is densely hairy, but can vary all the way to glabrous. Flowers are usually white, except when they're yellow. And the plants east of the Cascades in Oregon have relatively coarsely divided leaflets and long, big fruits and white flowers. I thought, great, we're going to divide this into species. It'll be fun. Because west of the Cascades, it has very finely divided leaflets and smaller fruits. And then I found out that there are third and fourth and fifth options. So somebody else is going to have to solve this one. There are some places you shouldn't go. The Lomatium triternatum group is one of them. They're innocent-looking little plants. This is the triternatum complex. 9 different lineages. At the time they made this, they now have 2 more. Sensible thing, you make it all one big variable population, except one of these species has been held out as one of these lineages has been held out as a separate species. And so people are saying, you've either got to put them all together, or you've got to split them all. Now, I personally say, where do species arise? From other species. So we're not upset about that. But people just have the vapors when they see that. So the current plan is to divide it into 9 or now 11 lineages that all look pretty much alike. And so now as we go on to other states, just joking, we're out of time.
There is time for a question or two.